I'm an alumni as well. What Stephanie said about how she first started poetry and she kept going back to it. That's what Uncultivated Rap is for me. You know, I graduated, I still love them, and that's fine. This piece is something I've never talked about in public. It's about I have a skin condition called psoriasis. It's about that. I remember the last time my subconscious became self-conscious. A nightmare that uncovered my fear of turning into dust. It was in the 2nd grade when I first heard the words skin condition. But I couldn't quite wrap my head around it, so I wrapped my fingers around my head and I started scratching. In middle school, I learned what dandruff was. And at first, I made the mistake of calling it flakes, but what it really meant was a snowstorm of insecurities and addiction to the imaginary friends on my shoulders that my hands visited far too often. I never wore black. Ever since a girl recommended I wear Selsun blue instead. She didn't understand. She didn't know that my earliest memory of a hospital was a small room and 8 doctors treating me like an experiment. They concluded that it was only a case of psoriasis. Psoriasis. It's spelled with a P. As silent as its symptoms, because while my dad reassured me that it was only cosmetic, I still tested positive for feeling like an infection. The psoriasis eventually spread to my body. It spread as tiny plaques that manifested themselves into reasons I couldn't stand my own skin. Plaques, each one in recognition of my achievements, most repulsive, a walking disease, least likely to ever feel loved. So I scratched and rubbed my insecurities until I was convinced that I could not scrape off this layer of ugly, that I could not bleed out the DNA of this condition. The area of disease on my scalp was a pie chart of how much I hated myself. So in high school, I grew out of my social personality and into my shame. People would not understand why my shaved head was more a lifestyle than a hairstyle, why I have a diary of skin underneath my fingernails. They wouldn't understand why my hands had become so accustomed to the taste of blood. A teenager should not be more comfortable with the words Taclonex, clobetasol, and Dovanex over the phrases, let me put on your hat, or why are you wearing pants, or do you want to go swimming? These were loaded questions that I didn't have the proper Kevlar for, because if a piece of me was exposed, if people shot enough glances at me, maybe fading into dust wouldn't be so bad after all. But since then, I have learned to love who I am. In college, I no longer hide beneath hats or hair that never quite resembled my persona of being short and to the point. And when someone asks me, what the hell is on your arms, or what the fuck happened to your legs, I bite my tongue and tell them I have a condition that affects my skin instead of telling them that they have a condition affecting their personality. I've translated flakes into pieces of myself that I keep giving to the world. And if I'm ever scratching, it's only to remind myself that there are still unexposed layers of beauty that I've been neglecting. Or I'm just itchy. But if I am, scratch my back and I will metaphorically scratch yours. Treat me like I'm human. And maybe one day, when I find a piece of myself in the 2nd grade again, with a son learning about dandruff for the first time, I'll tell him that everything will be okay. I'll reassure him that with each scratch, he is not being unmade. I'll explain that we are poetry, and in some complex variation of catharsis, we are shedding our stories with the wind. So that the next time someone tries to dismantle him with questions, he can brush them off his shoulders and finally find comfort in his own skin.